Yay!
Hi, all. My name's Keith Ewing. I like to scare people. It's been 3 days since the last time I scared someone. I'm here to tell you about haunted adventures, interactive Halloween adventures, we call them. What is it? Isn't it just a spook house? Don't people just jump out and say boo? Does anyone get chased with a chainsaw that doesn't have a chain in it? No. That's, well, we might do that, okay? But it's not the only thing we do. We have a plot. We have interaction between our guests and our actors who are doing improvisational acting. Okay? We have people who guide you through the experience. There's no guarantee that they'll live through it. We kind of hope that you'll live through it, but again, you signed a waiver. And we also give you choices. That's the thing that makes this unusual, is that you get to choose how. It's a sort of a choose your own adventure. Now, I'll tell you that the realities of real world doesn't mean that you have a lot of choices. So it's a pretty clear path where we want you to go. But still, we hope to give you the illusion of more choices than you actually have. I figured somebody at Nerd Night would recognize this guy. This is Richard Garriott, and he is the inventor of this art form. In 1988, he was a game designer, and he is also kind of a ham. I know the guy, I can say that. When you make a game, a video game or a computer game, you don't get to see your audience. I mean, I guess that's less true now. They've got streaming, you can watch people play games, but back then that was not the case. And he wanted to see someone interact with one of his creations. And so he had a big, nice house here in Austin that was an unusual place, and he put this thing together. He grabbed a bunch of his employees, a bunch of his friends, and he had a very eclectic group of friends. And the way that I knew him is through a group called the Society for Creative Anachronism. There's a lot of intermingling between the people that do this and the people who have been in the SCA at some point. And it's purely coincidental that the HEMA people were here, but we do similar stuff. But since then, he's a self-made astronaut. He's been various places. He's famous. You can read his book or watch his movie. He's got both of those things. But back then, he looked like that. And the name of the thing that he built was called Britannia Manor. It ran on even years between 1988 and 1994. We took the odd years off because it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. And so he would convert his house into this spook house. And I went through in 1988. It was wonderful. In 1990 and 1992, I helped him build it. In 1994, I was his assistant director. Okay. That guy, he went through with me in 1988. That's Brian Martin, a friend of mine, who went on to found the Barons Men, or one of the founders of the Barons Men. Yeah. So this thing couldn't have been built without this guy. Greg Dykes was a very close, still is as far as I know, very close friend of Richard at that time. And he was a genius builder. He owned a company called Custom Creation. And a maker. I wrote that down because you say to Greg Dykes, I want to make a thing. He says, how big? And he can make it, okay? His company, Custom Creations, I'd like to put a plug in, except that he retired and the company's closed. Sorry about that. You can see him there. Actually, that's a styrofoam car that he built for a superhero party. It's pretty wonderful. Britannia Manor had a very high budget for these kind of things. Richard was very well off, even more well off now, I think. And also, in later years, he tied the Spook House in with his company, Origins, which was a video game company, and so he got some marketing money. And I don't have the exact figures for 80, or 88, 90, or 92, but I wrote the checks in 94. He spent over $250,000 of his money and Origins money to put this on. And the thing is, it was invitation only. You couldn't buy a ticket. And that was true in the first 3. In 94, he sold one ticket, or one night of tickets as a charity, as a fundraiser for Zach Scott Theater. And those tickets went for as much as $200 a piece. Mostly he gave out invitations to people that he knew, but he also made available invitations to public on a first come, first served basis. And people camped for a week on his street to get those tickets. It was pretty cool. Richard used interesting construction. Much of his budget was for lumber because he built a lot of structures around his property and within his house. But also, he used theatrical style makeup. He had people come in and do prosthetics, many of his actors wore prosthetics, like this guy. That was all made by people working with this. It was all volunteer, except for in 94, me and Greg. Now, Greg got paid for all of it, but in 94, I was working for Greg. The lighting, much of it was donated, the rental of it was donated by High-End Systems, a theatrical lighting company here in Austin back then. And then he has so many artists. Part of it was the network of people that he knew, but also he had many artists working for him at Origin. And so there was some amazing art that was done there as well. Teardown was fun because he wasn't going to do it again for 2 years, and he didn't want to store all that stuff. He stored some of the best stuff, but he would also often just have a big bonfire full of all the lumber, and it was that was fun too. It was a very friendly environment. There were a lot of people who hooked up there and are still hooked up to this day. People who met there who are married happily to this day. There are people who enjoyed each other's company and went their separate ways as well. And there are also a few people that had difficulties in their marriage. And I have friends that I met there that I still know. And I think that's true of a lot of people. When you do these things, it's a very collaborative process, and it's a lot of fun, and people form friendships. And you know how, we all know how nerds cluster, right? Yeah. Oh, movie stars. In 1994, Richard's company was doing something called Wing Commander, and it was supposedly an interactive movie. And some of the people who were acting for that movie were John Rhys Davies, Mark Hamill. You all know those, yeah. And you may not know this name, Ginger Lynn. Okay, somebody knows that name. She was a porn star who went straight and did some movies and then went back to porn. But she was in Wing Commander also. But they came through the spook house. I've tried to scare those people, and let me say that John Rhys Davies is not this tall. He's this tall. Yeah, he's a big guy. Okay. So, in 1994, Richard was done. He wanted to be full-time in his house. And so, in 1996, people were saying, are we going to do it again? And he's like, no. Well, a lady named Michelle Dunlop was running a place called Wild Basin Wilderness Preserve. It's out on 360. She had heard about this and wanted to do a fundraiser. And so she contacted Richard and said, why don't you do it at my place? And he said, no. And Richard suggested that that Michelle talk to Greg Dykes. Michelle talked to Greg Dykes. Greg said no. Greg suggested that she talked to me. And I said, okay. In 1996, we only ran for 2 nights. It was cool though. We had fun. That's from 1996. That's me on the left. That's Michelle in the middle. I don't know the lady in front on the right. I don't remember. And I do remember the lady behind the bar, but if I start telling you all the names, we'll be here all night. What's that? No. Okay. There's Michelle. Michelle died 4 or 5 years ago, and I miss her. She was a friend. But she worked with us in 96 and 97, and that's a picture of her in 97. It was great fun. We had a low budget. We had as close to zero budget as possible. We were a fundraiser. It was very different from Richard's Haunt in that way. I say that, but Richard also, as he said, oh, I'm not going to do this again, he said, Keith, why don't you take all this stuff? And so all the stuff that he did store from Britannia Manor was handed over to me and was stored at Wild Basin for Haunted Trails. Haunted Trails ran from 1996 to 2005. I only ran it 4 of those years, 96, 97, 98, and 2003. I was involved in 2000, 2001, and 2002. I was doing my own thing in 99, which we'll get to. In 2004, my first child was born, and I got busy. Oh, Another thing that was interesting about Haunted Trails is that I mean, it's a wilderness preserve. And so we really needed to not do any damage to the trails. It's really, really hard to throw that many people through the trails and not do any damage to the vegetation. So they finally got tired of us and made us leave. But we did do a fairly good job of that, I think. And we did some pretty elaborate and wonderful things. It was great fun. That's my mom. The innovation that I came up with for that one is that it's hard to keep people together on an open trail at night. So I had people hold on to a rope like they were in kindergarten. And, you know, I used the fiction of, I mean, this rope protects you from evil. You must keep your hand on it at all times. And I drilled that in a really cool way. I put a ringer into every group. And about 2 stations in, she took her hand off the rope and said, "Oh, we don't have to do that." And then I killed her. Yeah. So the guide ropes worked pretty well. In 2003 was the one that I ran most recently. We had Lance Armstrong and Sheryl Crow came through. And they're in a holding area, and I kind of walk out, and I wasn't sure who I was looking at. So I walked out, and I'm like, "Hi, my name's Keith. This is my show." And he's like, Lance is like, "We love it." I'm like, "Can I get your name?" He's Lance. I'm like, "Okay, all right." And that's my brush with fame. That and John Rhys Davies has a huge head. Also in 2003, Richard came through. And as he finished, I met him at the exit, and I was introducing him to someone else who had just gone through, and I said to those people, I said, "Here's the person. This is the man that invented this art form." And Richard looked at them and said, "But he perfected it." And I was like, that was cool. Yeah. So I was busy in 1999 doing my own thing. It was called Ragnarok. I ran Haunted Trails in 96 and 97 and 98, and we made a lot of money for Wild Basin. And I was like, I don't have to do a 9 to 5. I could do this for myself. Yeah. No. Turns out that was incorrect. It was an artistic success, I'll have to say. We did, it was a shorter haunt because we were trying to get people through, but it was still that same interaction. We used Norse mythology, mixed it in with modern times, and Loki. I mean, Norse mythology is more well known now, I think, than it was back then. Loki took over a nuclear facility so he could start the Fimbulwinter, and we had to stop him from launching the missiles. And there were wolves and the Fenris wolf and the Jormungand serpent, and it was glorious. I loved it. But bankruptcy is not that bad. Turns out that if you're running something where people actually have to pay to get in for profit, the city has some pretty strict codes. And I don't know if you've ever dealt with the city of Austin. They're not necessarily consistent on those codes. I talked to a contractor and they said it was going to cost 20 grand. This is $1999. And 65 grand later, we were not up to code. So, like, we finally got up to what they wanted. We had to have sprinklers was the main thing. And so then we go out to the sidewalk to hook up to the city water main, and there wasn't enough pressure there. And they're like, well, this is not enough pressure to run your sprinklers. And I'm like, it's your pipe. They said, no, you have to fix it, and then you can sue us. Well, I was out of money. So Ragnarok that year was a Halloween party in which we cheerfully accepted donations. Suggested donations was $10, damn it. But that was what happened with Ragnarok. It was fun, though. Oh, one other thing, I was like, Christmas time, I still had rented the place on Lamar. And I should tell you that I had some beautiful murals on the wall and outside. And I took not a single picture of them. I'm so irritated. They were beautiful. But Christmas came along and I realized that I still have access to this and maybe I can make some money and bail myself out. And I created Ebenezer's Journey, which is basically a Christmas carol done as an interactive adventure. And if you know that story, Scrooge is basically a spectator through most of that. And so I had everybody in the cast act to the party, which was 4 or 5 people, as if they were Scrooge. And this is the only show that I've done more than once that was the same show. I should say both Britannia Manor, Haunted Trails, we did a different script every year. Completely different adventure. Ebenezer's Journey, I've done it at Ragnarok. I did it at Haunted Trails, or at Wild Basin for a fundraiser there. And then in 2010, which is actually the last thing I ran, is Pioneer Farms asked me to set it up out there. And they ran it, I'm like, I've done this 3 times and I don't want to do it anymore. But they continued to run it for 5, 6 years and I think they're still doing something similar. So it was, I mean, it's not a Halloween adventure, but it's the same style thing. So what's out there now? This. Scare for a Cure was set up by this guy. Jared Crippen, and I just noticed something about him that he has in common with Richard Garriott. 2 R's and 2 T's in their names. Double, yeah, both of them. Jared Crippen is a retired Austin police detective. Also was a reality star. Back, I'm not sure exactly the date, but early aughts, I think. Stan Lee did something on the Sci-Fi Channel called Who Wants to Be a Superhero? And Jared Crippen wanted to be a superhero. And they ran 2 seasons of it, and he was the winner of one of those 2 seasons. And so doing that got him in with Stan Lee, and he started doing the Comic-Con circuit and became a regular MC for Comic-Con, all while still being an Austin cop. But he also he had been doing stuff in his backyard. And he knew Richard because long ago, before he was a cop, he worked at Origin. And he went through 1 Britannia Manor, I think, in '94. But In 2007, 2006, there was no spook house. I mean, there were regular spook houses, but there was no Halloween adventure. And so everybody that had been building these since 1988 said, hey, we got to find another outlet. And so Jarrett said, y'all come on over, we'll build something. And he did things, well, I'll talk about the different locations, but I want to, still talking about him, I want to talk about his genius last year. In 2020, there was no haunt, for obvious reasons. In 2021, we just didn't know. Everybody remembers that summer, it got bad again. Okay? So he designed a haunt that we could do no matter what the COVID restrictions. It was all set in a prison. So he had his guard put face shields on. They were the guides. Put plexiglass between the bad guys and the good guys, or 6 feet of distance, and it was a genius script. It was, I was very impressed. Also, I was the main bad guy. So it was weird for me because there were no monsters. It was all just people, and so I had to be a monster of a person, and it kind of, I mean, acting is weird, right? So he did it at 3 different locations. I should say that's my child. What's that? The Elks Lodge, downtown by Barton Creek, he did for 2 years there. And then the Elks Lodge kicked him out because it's pretty disruptive. So he didn't have a place to go, and Richard called him. And so Richard offered his, not his old house, but the house that he had started building and then had to stop because had a slump in his money. I mean, he could start it again now, I think, but now it's out of code and everything. But so Jarrett did his spook house in the half-built mansion of Richard Garriott for 3 years, I think. And then they went out to Manor, to the Lorraine ghost town. And that is a tourist trap that is, it's all recently built in the last 30, 40 years. But he rented some space just behind it, and he has built this giant spook house, and it's wonderful. So one of the innovations that he brought was a permanent location, jumping ahead. To have a permanent location and not have to tear the thing down and burn it. Only Richard actually just had a big bonfire. We didn't do that on Haunted Trails. They would have freaked. But the other thing that Jarrett brought in is oceans and oceans of fake blood. There is so much blood. Before the event, if you're there, you can buy a white suit, a Tyvek suit, and put it on so that you don't mess up your clothes. But we warn you that you're going to mess up your clothes. That stuff, it will come out, it will wash out of your clothes, it will wash off your skin as long as you've moisturized. But if you haven't moisturized, it soaks in and stays red. Also, I think he needs to patent something that was developed there called the gore cannon. The gore cannon is something that he does is if he kills an actor, everybody gets splattered with blood. And it's basically a pneumatic device. And last year he improved it. I say him, it was his FX team, and they're a wonderful team. Last year improved it so that they're automatic. You push the button and blood goes and squirts, covers 6 people. It's wonderful. Funny story about that lady in the picture. I went to work with Jarrett last year, and I was walking around in my Ragnarok t-shirt, which I'll show you in a minute, and somebody called me by my name, and she was on top of the ladder. She said, "Keith." I said, "Yeah?" She says, "I worked for you at Ragnarok. I was 16 years old." I'm like, wow, small world. So here's a cool thing, is that Scare for a Cure, that's why they call it this. Proceeds go to Breast Cancer Research Center. That's a local Austin breast cancer research group. He also it gives money to the Manor School District, because we're out there in Manor. So he's got a huge organization. He's been doing it for 15 years now, and he's kind of tired of it. He's told me that this is his last year to direct this show, and he's recruited some fool to direct next year. So come see it next year. We're sold out. Sorry. Although if you want to come help, give me a buzz. We'll make it happen. One other thing that Jarrett has done, another kind of, this is out at the ghost town in spring. He takes the same kind of concepts and some brand new ones that are wonderful, and does a live D&D event, and it's really cool. You should check it out. And he's not letting me direct that. Before we get to the questions, I want to, well, no, we can do petting zoo. T-shirts are up here. I got T-shirts from Haunted Trails and Ragnarok and Britannia Manor, and I have a friend with a T-shirt from Scare for a Cure. So check those out. I'm open for questions. Oh, that's me.
All right.
That's me too.
Oh, wow. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, and all those above and beyond, I see a question from back here. Do I see other questions? All right. Jacob. Oh, my God. Twist. We got to do this. This is our AV guy, Jacob. All right. What's your question?
This is a 3-parter, but it's pretty simple. So, no, it's okay. What first got you interested in doing this? What gave you that sort of curiosity that you thought you could do it? And then I guess I'll bring it 2 parts. And then what kind of sustained you through all of those different iterations? What keeps you coming back? And you're still doing it, right? So what is it that drives you? Because it's hard work.
So that's 3 questions. 3 questions, right? 1, what got me into this? I moved to Austin in 1987. I was in the SCA, as we discussed. In 1988, all the cool kids were doing this thing, and I felt left out. So I found out what they were doing, and I went and saw it. And so then I got in with the cool kids, and I got to help them in 1990. That was pretty much it. What kept me going is, it turns out I really like to scare people. Also, I really as far as directing, I really love being a station actor, being the person who scares people, but I also love to tell people what to do. So directing is wonderful. And I joke about that, but it's very creative, and it's an unusual art form, and it's a place that I get to. Nothing that I do for a living is artistic, and so doing something artistic is something that I very much crave. What was the third one?
Why are you doing it now, still?
God, I don't know. Reclaiming my youth? I don't know. Ask me again next year.
All right. So we have a Twitter question, and it's a pretty good question, I think. For people who can't go to your haunt out in Manor this year, are there any alternative ones you would recommend that they visit in town?
I don't know, I'm too busy. Now, I will say, the Bat City Circus, I went to it last year. They were brand new last year. And they make a strong attempt, and there's even a little bit of interaction there, a little bit of acting. And as far as a commercial standard haunt, I think they do it pretty well.
All right. Now I'm going to scan the room again. Let's see what's going on. All right. All right. We're going to pull rank and ask our guest.
Keith, how would someone get involved if they wanted to help us put on such a fantastic show?
Yeah, that's a ringer question. All right. Here we go.
I did not ask her to ask that question, just because she is a volunteer. Scareforacure.org. Okay, it's out there, and there's volunteer links. If you want to help us out, go check it out right there. And it's for a good cause, and it's a lot of fun.
Thank you, Madhu. All right. At the bar, what you got?
What does your kid think of all of this?
So I showed you the picture of my oldest. That was 8 or 10 years ago. If you go out on the website right now, you'll see my youngest. He's 15, and he's a long-haired vampire, and it looks really cool. They love it.
All right, excellent. Okay, so if you had a question earlier and you had your hand up and now you're not putting your hand up, I don't know if your question was asked or if you're just exhausted, but all right, we're going to go with you. Persistence counts.
Thank you. I was actually going to wonder for the quest night for D&D, do you have a website we can search up, or is there something else?
Nice hat. Same website. There's another link on that website, scareforacure.org, and it'll tell you about Scare Night or Quest Night. Yeah. Okay.
Have any more questions? Anybody else? Oh. Then if you, then you. All right. What you got?
I do improv theater. I own an improv theater, and I love it. We can talk later. I've actually come out and taught improv to some of the people at Scare for a Cure back in the day. I love the idea of doing like an improv show in location, like in a place like this. And I was just wondering, have you ever thought of doing something other than, the Ebenezer sounds really cool. Have you thought of expanding it to like theater that you can walk through, basically?
All right.
The mechanics of the show have groups of 6 or less people walking through, and hopefully they never see another group once they leave. But in the beginning, we have a big area where a bunch of people intermingle. And to have actors in that area, maybe giving different parts of the story in creative ways, arguing amongst each other to do exposition or something like that, is very much something that I'd be interested in. Cool.
We have one last question, and it is from Preston.
Thank you. Let's say you really, really hate the idea of being scared, asking for a friend, and you're intrigued though, and are interested in what advice would you give somebody, or what would you say to be like, yo, do it? Does that, yeah?
Come help us scare other people. Or come to Quest Night. Because it will be scary.
All right, we're going to do a land yap round. Here you go.
Sorry, one last question. So you had mentioned that on your slide, when there were Richard's parties, there were lots of wild hookups and marriages and divorces. Did you meet your partner at Richard's? Yeah.
All right. I think we're going to call it on that one.